The report says Justice Samuel Alito did not report gifts on annual financial disclosure forms, including a private flight to Alaska and other amenities provided by billionaire hedge fund manager Paul Singer during a fishing trip in 2008. The report details that in July of that year, they stayed at the King Salmon Lodge and were served multi-course meals of Alaskan king crab legs or Kobe filet. They also enjoyed wine that cost $1,000 a bottle. According to ProPublica, Singer's Manhattan-based hedge fund was involved in at least 10 cases brought before the Supreme Court, many of them high-stakes business cases.
So Clarence Thomas isn't the only Supreme Court justice who's bought off by billionaires. Turns out Samuel Alito, not very surprising, also enjoys luxury vacations and lavish gifts from billionaires. Worse yet is the hedge fund manager Paul Singer, we see in this picture to the left of Justice Alito, who's standing in the middle, had cases presented to the court that Alito presided over. Now, Singer's hedge fund came before the court 10 times. Here's just one of the issues the court voted in his favor for, from ProPublica and their excellent reporting on this. And in 2014, the court agreed to resolve a key issue in a decade-long battle between Singer's hedge fund and the nation of Argentina. Alito did not recuse himself from the case and voted with the 7-1 majority in Singer's favor. The hedge fund was ultimately paid $2.4 billion. And Alito did not disclose that luxury fishing trip, nor his private jet flight with Singer. Of course he didn't. Alito also, in the most shameless and disgusting act I've ever seen, defended what he did in an op-ed that he wrote for the Wall Street Journal. Let's start with this headline. Justice Samuel Alito, ProPublica misleads its readers. The publication levels false charges about Supreme Court recusal, financial disclosures, and a 2008 fishing trip. Now, CBS Mornings has more info on Alito's disgusting denial of what he described as the charges made against him.
And Justice Alito did not recuse himself from any of them. In an op-ed published hours before ProPublica's report, Justice Alito denied what he dubbed charges made against him. In reference to the ride on that private plane, Alito said that Singer allowed me to occupy what would have otherwise been an unoccupied seat, and that he stayed in a modest one-room unit. Alito wrote that he followed what I understood to be standard practice by excluding the flight from his financial report.
Incidentally, that's exactly what Justice Thomas had to say about excluding all of his, being scratched on the back by billionaires. But I'll be absolutely fair, and I'm going to give you the opportunity to hear the argument presented by Alito himself from his op-ed in the Wall Street Journal. His defense of himself states, I had no obligation to recuse in any of the cases that ProPublica cites. First, even if I had been aware of Mr. Singer's connection to the entities involved in those cases, recusal would not have been required or appropriate. ProPublica suggests that my failure to recuse in these cases created an appearance of impropriety, but that is incorrect. Quote, there is an appearance of impropriety when an unbiased and reasonable person who is aware of all relevant facts would doubt that the justice could fairly discharge his or her duties. Now I'm going to stop right there. Miranda, I think that we are reasonable individuals, as the law would see us. Do you think that he could fairly decide a case like this?
His excuses are so paper thin that I could shred them by lightly blowing on them. Like the lightest gust of wind would just rip them in half. Geez, I had no idea those were his cases. Okay, you didn't know the name of the person. Okay, sure. Oh, geez, I didn't report it because it was transportation. Okay, it's not like it was a train ride on the Metro North for business. It was a flight on a private jet to a private vacation home in Alaska. I don't know. I know I'm different, but if it was me, I would report if someone paid for my coffee that morning. I would want to be as transparent as possible. Nothing, in the way, nothing hidden, but that's because I would probably take the job seriously, and these people definitely don't, and there's really no one policing them. They're sort of making the ethical rules and enforcing the ethical rules upon them their own selves. And so, that's going to draw in sort of the worst kind of people who are drawn to the most kind of corruption.
Exactly. And as you hinted, one of his arguments to defend himself was that he wasn't aware of Singer's involvement. So I'll give him a chance to defend himself in his own words. In his Wall Street Journal op-ed, he wrote, Republic of Argentina versus NML Capital. Mr. Singer's name did not appear in either the certiorari petition, the brief of in opposition, or the merits brief. Because his name did not appear in those filings, I was unaware of his connection with any of the listed entities, and I had no good reason to be aware of that. But unfortunately for Alito, ProPublica, which he was insulting during his defense of himself, had created a timeline between Singer and Alito's interactions and Singer's intervention in the court involving Argentina. So here is that. You can see that in 2007, Singer's fund asked the court to intervene in the Argentina litigation, which had declined later that year. Then in July, very, very quickly afterwards, Singer flies Alito on a private jet to Alaska. They spend days vacationing at a luxury lodge. And it continues on where you can see that it is obvious that Alito was aware of Singer's involvement in these pieces of litigation. I'll say this. Alito is right about one thing. He's right about the fact that he didn't have to recuse himself. Legally, he didn't have to recuse himself. That's the problem here. The issue in this case is that he had no obligation to recuse himself. The issue is in this case is that if he was a judge residing over any lower court, he would have had to recuse himself. But because he's a Supreme Court justice, and because we don't have a set rule of federal ethics for Supreme Court justices, the same way we do for federal judges, he didn't have to recuse himself. And Miranda, I think it's absolutely ridiculous for him to come defend himself when any reasonable person can read the facts here and say, that's wrong.
Yeah, the fact that there is no ethics office and no one policing what they must put down, what they must disclose is, I learned that not too long ago, and it astounded me. There's no ethics office. They're just sort of expected to punish themselves or write down what they've taken from as gifts from other people when no one's watching them. Why would you bother? It's definitely more of like a rules problem. It's a systemic problem, and it makes me wonder how many of these circumstances are happening that we're not aware of, that aren't being brought to light, because sadly, it's not shocking. It just makes me wonder how many people are getting away with it that we're not aware of.
Exactly. And when the cases that we are aware of are egregious, I mean, you have Justice Thomas who just refused to recuse himself on a case that directly implicated his own wife. I mean, it doesn't get any more corrupt than that.